Now, the rest of the story. In '79, it was the hottest sex manual ever written, and it hit the stands, and it shocked a few. But it did not rock the nation, for in many ways the United States lost its illusions through the '70s, so by the time the book was available to the public and the public was prepared for Plain Facts, that was the name of this sex manual, Plain Facts, never before had such a frank and detailed discussion of sexual matters appeared in print, for indeed these that we're discussing were the '70s of a century past. The book was written, first appeared in 1879, and this is the rest of the story. You know, it all began once upon a honeymoon, the honeymoon of Dr. John Harvey and his bride Ella. In fact, John and Ella actually spent their honeymoon in New England, writing a 504-page sex manual, an in-depth discourse on human sex and sexuality, years before Sigmund Freud would even approach the subject. In the book's preface, Dr. John wrote, "It is hoped that the reader will bear in mind that the language of science is always chaste in itself, that it's only through a corrupt imagination that it becomes vested with impurity," and that expressed, the bride and groom proceeded to inform their readers, as few non-physicians ever had. And one of the big reasons this publication was widely accepted was that for all of its frankness, it fervently parroted the mores of its era. Give you an example. Illicit intercourse is a loathsome ulcer eating at the heart of civilization. Here's another quote. "Though a man may never have committed an overt act of unchastity, if he cannot pass a handsome female on the street without in imagination approaching the secrets of her person, he is as truly unchaste as the veriest debauchee." Too much sex, says Dr. John, even for married couples, will precipitate absolute physical ruin. And vigorous physical exercise is recommended for those moments of weakness when unchaste ideas intrude. Plain Facts. Apparently an instant success. Sold well for many years. Plain Facts. Perhaps a significant footnote that throughout their long and otherwise prosperous marriage, John and Ella had no children of their own. They did, however, manage to rear and educate 42 orphans. 42 orphans. And one thing more. John, the medical doctor, who tried to make the world's most whispered subject as acceptable as motherhood and apple pie, he later did something with his brother that made them both world famous. He co-invented cornflakes. That's right. The respected Michigan physician who spent his honeymoon writing a sex manual was Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. And now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. Sex and cornflakes. They don't seem like they should go together. John Kellogg originally thought his life course was to be a school teacher. At the young age of 16, John taught at a district school in Hastings, Michigan. By 20, he had enrolled in a teacher's training course at Michigan State Normal College. However, his family convinced him to study in a 6-month medical course at Russell Charles Hygiotherapeutic College in New Jersey. John then attended medical school at the University of Michigan and the Bellevue Hospital Medical College in New York City. He graduated in 1875 and in the following year became director of the Western Health Reform Institute, which he later renamed the Battle Creek Medical Surgical Sanitarium. Doesn't really roll off the tongue that well, does it? The sanitarium had its own experimental kitchen where they developed vegetarian foods which John thought were better for his patients. They also taught classes in food preparation. His wife, Ella, published a cookbook called Science in the Kitchen, which contained hundreds of recipes along with discussions of nutrition and dietary management. Some of her recipes included a meat pâté made from peanuts called nuttolene, a combination of nuts and grains called protose, and various types of nut butters including peanut butter. John's theories included the belief that most diseases could be alleviated or cured by changing a person's intestinal bacteria. A poor diet favors harmful bacteria, he said. He recommended a regimen of specific foods to heal his patients, and he had some notable patients, such as former President William Howard Taft, aviator Amelia Earhart, Nobel Prize-winning playwright George Bernard Shaw, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison. In the 1870s, John and his family began experimenting with a soft breakfast food that was easy to chew. He mixed a dough of wheat, oats, and corn, then cooked it at a high temperature for a long time. As it cooled, he broke it into crumbs. He originally called it granula, but had to change the name after learning that James Caleb Jackson also marketed a wheat cereal under the same name. John avoided litigation by changing the name from granula to granola. 20 years later, John made up a batch of wheat berry dough. He was called away for a medical emergency and forgot all about the dough until he saw it the following morning. Rather than throwing it away, John rolled out the dough and baked it. Why not see what happens? What's the worst that could happen? John was surprised by the flakes that his batch produced, and his patients loved it. John called the cereal Granos. In April 1896, John received a patent for flaked cereals and process of preparing same. Will Kellogg, John's brother and business manager of the sanitarium, decided to try Granos on the mass market, but he altered the recipe slightly. He added sugar to make the flakes more palatable to a wider audience. Now, this caused a rift between the brothers that lasted for decades. In 1906, Will set up a separate company called Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, which eventually became Kellogg Company. And John was ultimately denied the right to use the Kellogg name for his cereals. During the first year of production, Kellogg sold tens of thousands of pounds of flaked cereal. Now, Charles William Post had been a patient of John's, and he loved the flaked cereal. He founded his own dry goods company in Battle Creek called Post Holdings. In 1898, Post sold his own cereal, which was a mixture of yeast, barley, and wheat. He called his cereal Grape Nuts. In 1906, Post began selling flaked cereal called Elijah's Manna. The name was eventually changed to Post Toasties Double Crisp Cornflakes. In 2006, 59 years after his death, John was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame for discovering the process of tempering and the invention of the first dry flaked breakfast cereal, which transformed the typical American breakfast. The tempering process is still used in the production of flaked cereal. It's hard to believe that a man who wrote a sex manual invented flaked cereal. By the way, if you'd like to take a look at Plain Facts for Old and Young, the sex manual Mr. Harvey spoke about, I'll post a link to it in the description below. It's in the public domain and you can read it for free. Do you have a favorite brand of cornflakes? I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.